security, make sure that we can meet all the safety requirements. And we don't have a first shipment date. I don't know that I can even give you a rough estimate because of the challenges involved in that.
Okay, so my question would have been ballpark, and you said you don't have one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else online who would like to raise their hand to ask a question? If so, please do so. Let's ask if there's any other audience members who would like to come forward. Please come forward. Just tell us your name and who, if any, you represent.
Yes, good evening. My name is Joni Ahrens, and I'm with a co-founder of Concerned Citizens for Nuclear Safety back in 1988. I have a couple of questions. So I wanted to, when we're talking about the plan, it's important for the officials sitting up here to understand that according to the 2020 census, 25%, roughly 25% of the people in New Mexico do not have internet access. And so more needs to be done in terms of outreach to let people know what's being planned, that these stakeholder meetings are coming up, triannual, however you say that, meetings with management are coming up. So there needs to be additional ways to do that. Public service announcements are one way, and in English and Spanish. And for the international district here in Albuquerque, Vietnamese language translations. Also PSAs. Oh, and the Roswell Daily News Post has a Spanish day twice a year or twice a month, where public service announcements could be printed for people to become aware of these things. And part of the negotiations talked about the need for more outreach. Another outstanding question is about the NEPA. Mr. Avery, are you aware that LANL, NNSA, DOE are planning to release a draft LANL SWICE, Site-Wide Environmental Impact Statement, this fall as well? It would be good for you all to be in coordination so that the burden of providing comments to probably 300 or 400 page documents, not including all of the references that will be reviewed as part of making informed public comments, that burden doesn't fall on the people of New Mexico concurrently. And then I would like to understand the size, the planned size of panels 11 and 12, because there's no longer, as of October, November timeframe, there's no restrictions on the size of those panels.
So Joni, I can confirm that those will be the same size as the others. So they will be the same length and width as the other panels. You asked a question earlier about the height, how tall it is. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, but I know that we will not be able to stack anymore, whether it's a 13-foot back or a 16-foot back. We won't be able to put any more waste in those than we do in the other panels.
Okay. It's just an outstanding question. Oh, are you answering or no?
I was going to address your first couple of questions.
Okay.
Or statements.
And then I have one more question at the end.
Okay. Just quickly, understand your comment about the limitations that not everybody has internet access. I think that's an important point, and it's something that we'll continue to take into consideration as we move forward and we plan our public outreach engagements. So thank you for that comment. And then relative to the NEPA, DOE is a very large organization. So clearly we want to be as best coordinated as we can across the department and working with our stakeholder and fellow offices across the department. So we'll continue to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. And so I mentioned that because of the April 4th meeting that took place with Jill Ruby and Ike White in Santa Fe. And then my final question. I think it's important. So red flags came up when you're highlighting the ECA, the Energy Communities Alliance. I think you need to be transparent. DOE needs to be transparent to talk about the amount of money that ECA receives annually in grants from the Department of Energy. And I think it's self-serving on both parts to support each other that way when ECA is being funded by DOE. And that money came out of the monitoring and technical assistance money that was part of a program in the part of the settlement of the waste management PEIS back in the 90s and early 2000s timeframes. And that was money that was provided to NGOs to write technical reports that made a tremendous difference in terms of cleanup and public participation and the ability to have technical experts working for NGOs to address the technical experts within DOE. And changes were made across the complex as a result of that MTA money.
Your time is up, but if you'd like, you can ask a follow-up question.
Yeah, respectfully, I ask that you consider revising, supporting, or quoting ECA in these processes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that lesson in some of the history of that. I appreciate that, and we'll consider that. Thank you.
Very good. We have a few more questions online, and if there's more, we were going to take a break, but I think it might, without objection, I might just keep going and see if we can get a couple of questions. Rose is next, if you want to unmute Rose, and Rose present one.
Hi, thanks for having this as an open meeting. My name's Rose Gardner. I live in Eunice, right here near the state line. The WIPP site is about 35 miles away. I've got waste control specialists just outside of town. I also have your Rango facility right here next to your WCS right outside of town. Referring back to 2014 when the 2 accidents happened at the facility and there was questionable waste that was placed, I believe, at WCS. I'd like the status on those containers, number 1. And number 2, I wanted to kind of go back to something that Mr. Kirby had referred to, who's going to pay for it. As I recall back when the accidents happened at WIPP in 2014, the taxpayers paid for it. My husband works in the oil field. We recently got our general contractors insurance policy. It completely says that terrorist and nuclear incidents or accidents are not covered. So if a general person has an accident, somebody's going to pay, and it's probably going to be a private pay situation. Somebody's going to go broke. Who can afford that? We're not covered, and we're the taxpayers. So, in fact, you haven't answered all the questions. WIPP won't pay. The taxpayers pay. Let's get real. And number 3, we want more transparency. This just proves that we're not getting it all. Thank goodness you're on tonight, and I'm very thankful for it. But y'all need to stay open. You need to let us know what's going on. If it hadn't been for some of the groups that I do belong to, which are the Alliance for Environmental Strategies here in Eunice, and the Southwest Alliance for a Safe Future, and other allies, I wouldn't know you had this thing going on. We want to know what's going on. Thanks a lot for having my questions answered, especially regarding that waste. It's here outside of town. I believe it's still here. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have any specific question for our panel?
I want to know where the waste is. If you're going to move that other container that's there at the site in August, then I believe there's more waste here. Now, if it's been moved, fine, but I'd like to know.
Great, thank you.
To
Thank
clarify,
you.
are you talking about the container of waste that was involved in the incident in 2014?
I believe there's more of the same type of waste. I-
Waste that was taken to WCF in 2014, and I think it's go to the web.
Okay.
Some of it is still there. When was the
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay, so Don is helping clarify, if you're concerned with the Lano waste, the additional containers, something like 70 containers that exist still today at WCS in Andrews, Texas, we are developing a plan to remove that waste and to hopefully someday move it to WIPP. In order to do that, there will be a number of regulatory bodies that would have to agree, that we would have to make sure we can do it very safely, which we believe we can, and we would have to make sure that all the stakeholders buy into that process. So we are a ways away from being able to move that waste, and but we hope to begin discussions with the regulators on that very soon.
Thank you. I hope it's expeditious.
Very good. Thank you. And it looks like our last question online is from Linda. If we could unmute Linda. And then if there's any other questions from the audience here, we'll do those. Linda, if you could identify yourself and tell us if you represent anyone.
Hi, my name is Linda Birchfield, and I'm just a concerned citizen representing myself. I have a question and a comment. Which do you want first?
Why don't you do the comment first and then ask the question, and our panel will attempt to answer.
Okay. The comment is that I've heard a lot of people requesting transparency, that you let the little people know. You don't wait for them to come to your presentation, but to inform them. So I'm sure you could get on local TV stations, you could get in the newspapers just to broadcast what's going on. And my question is, why is the level of radioactivity less when it's underground?
Because there's so much natural radiation around us all the time that's not from the nuclear waste. It's from other sources, like the earth itself or cosmic radiation. So there are a lot of other sources that are just naturally occurring radiation all around us. And the best way to shield radiation is with, or the best way to reduce it is with shielding. And when you get below ground at that level, you've taken out most of that natural background radiation away. Same way as when I discussed earlier, when you go underwater at depths, you do the same thing. So it's just removing that natural background radiation that's with us all the time. And
Okay.
our point that we were making is even though we have a waste repository and we have, 275,000 containers we talked about being stored or disposed of down there, the natural levels are still lower there than they are on the surface.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question, Linda? Sounds like.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you ready to go? Come forward and tell us who you are.
Yes, thank you very much. My name's Sandra McCarville, and I am representing myself and my small business, which is located right outside of Albuquerque. I am proving that you are all right, that transportation is of concern. And so, so I want to thank you for recognizing that throughout the state and throughout the country. And, you know, I know you guys live in Carlsbad, but there are a lot of people around the state who either are concerned or should be concerned if they knew about it. So, so I think there's a lot of scope for reaching out. My specific questions are related to what is heading towards WIPP. And some of this has been discussed already. But at the speed of safety, how many shipments and maybe a correlation to the amount of waste? Because it sounds like that is morphing. Could how many shipments and how much waste are to be anticipated prior to the end of this permit or during this 10-year extension? So that's one piece of the question.
Why don't we let them answer and then we'll come back and give you time for your other questions.
So from a shipment standpoint, our target be an average of 15 shipments a week. But there are a lot of things that factor into that. So for example, this past winter was terrible. I mean, we canceled a ton of shipments because we wanted to stay on the road. So a lot of the shipments.
Oh, you smell so nice too.
A lot of the shipments from Idaho didn't come that time of year. But that is our goal, to get to 15 a week safely.
And that is to meet the cleanup commitments at facilities across the country, Los Alamos and others. They're making agreements with their states. They're trying to get their sites cleaned up. And so in order to get them cleaned up in a timely fashion, we're trying to get to a safe level of shipments of roughly 15 to 17 a week.
Good. Next question.
That makes sense. And it sounds from some of the previous answers as though the character of those shipments may be changing with more plutonium or whatever. So I'm wondering to what extent you've done a risk assessment for what's coming in now and what may be coming in the future, and whether in the future you can share that.
Yeah, our waste acceptance criteria is not changing. So we are accepting the same waste by and large that we've always accepted. If the material cannot meet our waste acceptance criteria that we've had all along, it cannot come. So we're not changing or loosening anything. We are holding the line at the waste acceptance criteria that we've always had.
So understood. I guess maybe let me rephrase. The world is changing, as you say. You couldn't meet your 15 to 17 per week target during the winter because of icy roads and whatnot. So a risk assessment includes all sorts of other things, including what's in the shipment. So I'm wondering to what extent you do kind of an expanded risk assessment, and to what extent you plan to do that into the future, and whether that will be something you will share in the future.
Yeah, it's a difficult question because we do risk assessments and risk modeling and, safety assessments on so many aspects of what we do. From the work that's been done with stakeholders decades ago to stuff that if we want to make a small tweak in the permit or a small change in where we handle a particular waste, it all has to be analyzed usually in our nuclear safety documentation. Our nuclear safety documentation is voluminous, and every little change has to be analyzed. Is it a change that requires us to redo the assessment? Are there different risks? Are there changes in it? So that's sort of a world we live in all day, every day, is assessing has there been any change? Has there been any change in where we're putting the waste, in what's in the waste, or the people involved in that waste, the training. So we're just in a constant state of assessing our risks and making sure that they're still within the boundaries that we had approved before. If they're not, then we have to do a whole nother assessment to see what sort of measures we need to take to get them within our bounds. So.
And that all makes sense. I guess my plea is just that as you go through that process, you probably end up with a very large ball of wax, but you can probably, pull that down into something that can be shared with your various communities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome very much. Did you have a follow-up question? Please, please. We'll give you.
Thank you. I'm Cindy Wheeler again. And I'm confused. And when I get confused, I start seeing smoke and mirrors. And that's what's happening here. So I'm going to call out what I see as the elephant in the room. NNSA and DOE plan on bringing surplus plutonium to WIPP. They also have indicated that they'd like to bring the new waste stream of new plutonium pit production to WIPP. I realize that has been placed on hold and kicked down the road a bit for about 5 to 10 years, but not to acknowledge it isn't fair, because I know that's what the plan is. The plan is to wait now until this permit comes towards its end, and in 5 to 10 years, bring it up again. There is a new mission. We've got to call it what it is. I don't want the new mission, and I'm arguing against it, but to say that it doesn't exist is not fair, and that's a transparency issue. Thank you.
You're welcome. Did you have a comment or question?
Statement.
Please just identify identify yourself and say if you represent any organization, if you do, and then your comment and your question.
Absolutely. My name is Elizabeth Smith, and I'm with DNA, Demand Nuclear Abolition. I'm a tribal member of the Laguna Pueblo, and I'm also Lakota and Kickapoo. And I'm also a keeper of the 7 generations. 7 generations explained quickly. I am 7th generation, as are you and all of us in here are. And we are responsible for the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren not yet born. Just as our parents prepared our way, as our grandparents and great-grandparents. So that's the 7th generation. That's who we are. And if you're in a position of power, it is your responsibility to make proper decision for future generations. I wasn't anticipating to speak today, but I saw on your banner, serving our nation for future generations. Future generations, they're not here yet, and we speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, even creature nations and Mother Earth herself. She is a sentient celestial being. This is our home. And we must remember our we have a responsibility amongst the cosmos. This is the world on top of Mother Earth. I had to bring this as a reminder because this is important for all of us to do right now. Because the nuclear issue began in New Mexico and is now a global issue. And it must end where it began. WIPP is here in New Mexico. And as an example also of the vast toxins and radiation and mess that this issue is making. And Oppenheimer should not be a tribute or honored on a red carpet, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Now that I got that out, but I'm very serious because Mother Earth needs to rest. This madness has got to stop. Many changes must come and will come. My question is, will you, being in New Mexico, help stop this global issue that's just become a huge mess? Do whatever you can to finish WIPP. No expansion. No expansion. Close it down as soon as possible. If you can by 2024, as agreed to, that would be great. You can make all the safety measures by train, plane, and automobile, but that's not really the issue. The issue is this waste that came from something in the ground that's supposed to stay there, just like gold and lithium. Those things are supposed to stay there. Right
Since
now.
your time is up, would you like 30 more seconds to
Oh.
finish your question?
Well, okay, the question is, will you do whatever you can as a seventh generation keeper to end WIPP forever?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that we've addressed that subject at length throughout the session. I think our position on the importance of the operation of the waste isolation pilot plant is clear, both from a supporting national security perspective, and it's important for helping to clean up the environment.
And so our intention is to take the actions called upon by Congress in the Land Withdrawal Act and to clean up America by using WIPP to its fullest.
The only thing I would add is the state of New Mexico needs WIPP to stay open if we want to clean up Los Alamos. So closing WIPP 2024 would leave a lot of waste in a much less safe condition in Lano. So we've got to find.
Can you let them go through their answers? And then if you like, you could have some follow-up. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say that I was going to highlight how important it is to keep WIPP open. WIPP is what's allowing sites like Los Alamos to become safer and clean up the legacy waste there. That's it.
Would you like to come up for one more minute and make a comment?
Thank you. In my analysis, it's a double-edged sword. Because if Los Alamos was the priority, Los Alamos would have been dealt with a long time ago before the chromium got to the drinking water aquifer. Having experienced the last 5 years of permit modifications at WIPP and the number of misinformation, untruths that have been told to the people of New Mexico about WIPP, about Lano. As Cindy says, it's not fair. It's not fair, and we're holding you to account of it. And I go back to the analogy that it's a double-edged sword, and the double-edged, one side of the sword is to hold New Mexico hostage for as long as possible while all the other states get cleaned up on one hand, and on the other side of the sword, that now we're in a place where the promises that DOE made that WIPP would close in 2024 are not happening. I offer that as a perspective from somebody who's been working on this issue for 35 years. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions online. I see James Eagle might have a follow-up question. Is that correct? James, would you like one more minute to ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on the question that Cindy brought up. Can you talk at all about the plan to dispose of the old plutonium pits, dilute it in Savannah River, bring it across, and involve Lano, and then dispose it in WIPP? I mean, is that something you're planning for? And if that happens, to get rid of all the plutonium at the Pantex plant in Texas, is there room in WIPP currently envisioned to do that? Or is this something you just cannot talk about at this point? Thank you.
We'd like to take that.
Yeah, we've tried to address what we're doing with any waste that comes from NNSA and any of their processes that either dismantle weapons or whatever they do. If they create a waste that meets our waste acceptance criteria, then our intention is to take it as quickly and safely as we can to eliminate it from the surface environment.
So I do not see any more questions. Any other questions from the audience? If seeing none, would any of you like to make closing comments of any kind?
I appreciate the passion. I appreciate the comments. I learned a lot tonight. I got a lot of good feedback that we can use. We're gonna stay committed to these kind of forums in the future. I hope we can get a much larger audience and reach a lot more people like folks have suggested. So I really look forward to continuing this dialogue, to taking some of the things you said and making changes to our programs, and to continue to strive to be as safe as we possibly can.
This has been extraordinarily helpful. We thank you for your questions, and that will wrap it up. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, if anyone would like to have